In this video, we're looking at using trigonometric formulas, such as you will find on the back of the reference sheet of the Regents exams. So we're looking at this problem. It says find sine of 1/2 a if the cosine of a is 3/4 and 0 is less than a is less than 90. You see, this part right here is simply telling you which quadrant is the angle in. Since we're between 0 and 90 degrees, this means we're in the first quadrant, so let's keep that in mind. Now, the first step for problems that involve these formulas is find a useful formula. And to find a useful formula, we need to look on the reference sheet. You should have a reference sheet, and you will certainly find one attached to your Regents exam. And I'm looking for a formula that involves what it is that I'm trying to find. In this case, I'm trying to find something that has to do with a sine and half of its angle. So I'm looking here on the reference sheet, and I'm attracted to where it says the functions of a half angle. Right here, I see a formula that it says the sine of 1/2 a is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus the cosine of a over 2. This one seems very likely to be the best formula to use. So I'm going to just put right into, I'm going to write this down so it's easy for you to read it. From the reference sheet, it says the sine of 1/2 a is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus the cosine of a, and then that whole thing divided by 2. Excellent. Now, this is the formula we will use. The second step is to be clear about what we know and what we need. So what things do we know? Well, we know that the cosine of a is equal to 3/4. We also know that this is an angle that is in the first quadrant. I'm going to list that as something we know. The cosine of a is equal to 3/4, and we are in quadrant 1. What are we going to need? Well, by what we need, what I mean is, if I'm going to use this formula, what things do I have to make sure I have? Well, I have to be sure that I have a cosine of a. I need the cosine of a so I can put it into this formula and find what it is that it's asking for. That's excellent because it just so happens that that's exactly what we know. So in this case, we know what we need, and so we can go straight to step 3, which is to substitute and simplify. So what are we substituting into? We're substituting into this formula right here. So we're using this. It says the sine of 1/2 a is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus the cosine of a, writing down the formula again, over 2. So now let's do the substitutions. So this is the sine of 1/2 a is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus. Instead of this cosine of a, we're going to write 3/4 right there, since that's our substitution, over 2. This whole thing, of course, is the radical. This over 2 is still underneath the radical. We're going to have to simplify now. That was the substitution, and now the simplification. Let's see. Well, this plus or minus, let's think a little bit about that for a second. If we take an angle that is in the first quadrant, and then we divide it in half so it's become smaller, it's still going to be in the first quadrant, and since this is the sine of 1/2 a, we can go with the plus here. So this is going to be the sine of 1/2 a is equal to the positive square root of, let's do this part next, 1 minus 3/4. Over here on the side, we'll figure out what is 1 minus 3/4. 1 minus 3/4, I need a common denominator, so I multiply by 4 over 4. This is 4 over 4 minus 3 over 4. 4 minus 3 is 1, so this is 1/4. So on top, this is 1/4, and this whole thing is divided by 2. When you're dividing, it's like multiplying by the reciprocal. And so, again, over here on the side, this is 1/4 divided by 2. That's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 2 is 1/2. So this becomes 1/8. And so this is telling us that we have the sine of 1/2 a is equal to the square root of 1/8, which is the square root of 1 over the square root of 8, which is 1 over the square root of 8. So we have here, the sine of 1/2 a is equal to 1 over the square root of 8. We don't like to leave radicals in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 8. 1 times the square root of 8 is the square root of 8. Square root of 8 times the square root of 8 is 8. And so our final answer is that the sine of 1/2 a is equal to the square root of 8 over 8. And that is our final answer.